book on the Zhou Dynasty.
We learned a lot of interesting facts.
Like, did you know that the Zhou Dynasty was the longest lasting dynasty, lasting over 700 years?
What? Cool!
Amazing!
Enjoy our iMovie.
The mandate of heaven was first used during the Zhou Dynasty, when King Wu said that the mandate of heaven told him to put his people and from the government's decisions and choices. Another leader was a man named Sun Tzu, who was a general in the government and wrote a book called The Art of War. Feudalism was that the king was in the center of his land. If there was a raiding party on the edge of the country, then he could not get to it fast. So he separated his land and gave each piece to a nobleman. In return, these nobles would have to guard and protect the land. It was a good idea, but it led to the downfall of the Zhou Dynasty. The Zhou Dynasty expanded its borders to non-Chinese areas, and the Zhou invented iron and chopsticks, mounted cavalry, and they reconstructed the crossbow.
When the Zhou Dynasty conquered the Shang Dynasty, they mostly kept the art the same. Bronze jars were made in shapes of birds and dragons, but mostly they kept the bronze to bronze vessels with jade ornaments and decorations. The Zhou also discovered how to make iron. In the Zhou Dynasty, they had a large amount of classical literature. One of the books written was the Book of Changes. In the Zhou, they had some books nicknamed as the classics. One of the classics was the classic of poetry. Something the Zhou created was the dragon. To them, dragon stood for goodness and luck. The Zhou thought the dragon was to be respected. Confucius was the scholar who started Confucianism. Lao Tzu was the man who started Taoism. Confucius thought that the way you behave was what mattered most. Lao Tzu thought that you must go with the flow. Roads and canals would help traders get to their trading posts faster. Some of the things the Zhou people would make and the traders would buy to trade were the deadly crossbow and iron plows.
In the Zhou Dynasty, there are 4 major classes. The highest class was the king and the high scholars. The high scholars were the smartest people in their school. The next highest class was farmers and peasants. Farmers and peasants were very much respected because they worked with the land. The second lowest class was artisans, people that worked with their hands, artists. And the last class was merchants. Merchants would go around the village selling stuff. Slaves were not even considered a class because they were not considered people. Farming was a very big part of all the dynasties, and it was also the most common job. If you were a high scholar or a relative of the king, he would give you your own city, or otherwise known as state, to rule over. If you had wealthy parents and or were a boy, your parents would send you to school. There is also the fact that if you did well in school, you would become a scholar and would take the government test. The system wasn't fair, though, because girls were not supposed to go to school, and that rule wouldn't end for a long time. The women of the Zhou Dynasty were treated with no respect, so women were not allowed to take the government test because women were considered incapable compared to men. The Zhou Dynasty worshipped many gods. Some of the gods were as old as the Shang Dynasty. Others were gods that they created. The Zhou Dynasty people also believed that any person who died in your family still existed as a ghost or a spirit. During the celebration of everybody's birthday, yin yang, they would sacrifice to the elders in their family who had died. The Zhou Dynasty normally had rice for a part of their meal every night. New food such as pig, sheep, and cattle were traded for. By 750 BC, the people of the Zhou Dynasty started eating chicken from China, and by 500 BC, people started eating sheep from China and pig and cattle from West Asia. In the Zhou Dynasty, music and entertainment was a rare thing because most people had to work. Music was a big thing in China because everybody was so interested. They even made music the same symbol as enjoyment. It is kind of unbelievable, but the Chinese even played a game similar to golf. It had tees, holes, and clubs to hit with. Entertainment was a big thing at the time because you could only have entertainment if you were wealthy.
This is the